This is Gertrude Lyons. We're on Bring Out the Best Blog Talk Radio, and we're in parenting today. And our next caller is Michelle. And the general gist of Michelle's question is, how do I handle it when my parents do something with my kids I ask them not to? So, Michelle, if you could say a little bit more about that, and it's a great question.
Hi, Gertrude. Thanks for taking my question.
Sure.
I had a recent event that got me thinking about this question more in general. So the recent thing that happened was last weekend my kids were with my parents, and they asked me, can we take them to this farm? There's all sorts of fall activities, corn maze, everything. And I said, sounds great. Go ahead and do it. I knew the place. We had been there before, and I said, do everything except for the hayride, because the hayride has all this, like nighttime scary stuff that they do, but it's all still there during the day. And my kids are 5.5 and 2.5, and I just, especially for the 5.5-year-old, she has enough awareness to go, oh, what's that? It could be disturbing and scary.
Sure.
And she tends towards being easily kind of scared by, stories that kids tell. Kids are starting to talk about vampires and zombies, and so she doesn't want to go to the basement because there's zombies. So I'm thinking the last thing I need is for her to see more zombies and, that sort of thing. So, this, we had an exchange. Unfortunately, it was just over text. I wish I had done this, more face-to-face.
Yeah.
But I thought we were clear, and then I heard from my daughter yesterday that, we went on the hayride, and, and we got to do all this stuff. So on the one hand, I thought, well, I really want to just, assume the best, believe the best, and that maybe, we didn't understand each other well. But then I started thinking about how my parents actually kind of take a little bit of delight in doing things with my kids that I don't let them do. Like, it's usually really benign, small stuff, but it's got me thinking more about this line of I think actually they have kind of an agenda that they would say is playful or fun of doing things that I wouldn't necessarily do with my kids. And it hasn't been a big deal to this point. This is the first thing where I go, well, I need to do something because we can't maintain this relationship this way.
Right.
So does that make some sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of hear in the question, you're pretty clear that this is not something you want to continue. And probably
Exactly.
somewhat you had inklings of it, leading up to this, that, you kind of let go because they weren't like really big things. So they, sounds like, I'm going to say take advantage, but I don't mean it in such a, necessarily aggressive way. But you don't feel heard and seen by them. And, these are your kids. So I think, there's that sense of like, well, they're, and you get to look at, this is a great one for you as a parent to get to look at, like, these dynamics, from you with your childhood with your parents, so we won't necessarily go into that right now, but it does tease up these things, like what I'm choosing to parent my kids how I want to parent, but here are my parents who parented me a certain way, and are they trying to assert themselves? Like, what's happening here? Where did I not feel heard and seen, or my wishes weren't carried through? Or we don't talk necessarily as a family. Like, they may have more opinions about, the choices you're making, but they're not articulating them. They're just, overriding them and doing what they think you should be doing rather than talk it through with you. So, it sounds like an easy answer, but not necessarily, is to have the conversation with them, and really bring this out. And you can start it from a standpoint of like, tell me about how you got on the hayride, and and get them kind of talking and thinking before you necessarily have to jump right in. Like, hey, I'd like to get a little get them kind of thinking and talking and hearing kind of what they have to say about it first, with explicit agenda that by the end of that conversation, you're going to have made it very clear that, when we set out parameters with the kids, we expect them to be met. And I
Right.
don't want to have to worry about that. I don't want to have to wonder. Um, just like with any other caregiver that we have, take care of our kids, we expect our rules and the parameters we're putting forth to be followed. You know, can you
Right.
do that? And not can you probably, but will you? And let them react and see what they say. And they'll, they'll probably say yes. I don't know if you need to say anything at that point of like, because if they're not, I mean, the ultimate that would come from there if they did keep breaking it is like, there's going to be consequences. I'm not going to let my kids be with people who I aren't going to, who I can't trust to follow the guidelines that we set forth.
Right. Right. Well, and that's, I was aware, like, I felt really angry
Yeah.
when my daughter told me what they had done. And I had to kind of, like, talk myself back a little bit and just go, like, okay, they've never done something like this big of an infraction before. So, let's allow for there might have been a miscommunication. And then, like, okay, well, I'm angry enough that it tells me that it's not just about this
Right.
one thing.
Exactly.
And so it got me thinking about past instances and, where else is that happening? And then I hadn't really thought of in terms of like, oh, that I'm not feeling seen by them. That was kind of a theme for me growing up because I've felt, pretty scared to talk to them about this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I feeling scared? They're the ones who should be feeling scared.
Right.
Like, that they have the most to lose in the interaction. And, and I'm not
Absolutely.
jumping to, them from being with my kids, but we do have to have some ground rules, and I think it might even be a place to, start some of those other conversations of, I don't know, just kind of like learning to be with my parents in a different way, like
Yep.
as a grown up than I was as a kid.
Absolutely. And, this, well, this is in every caller, but I think particularly here, Michelle, like this is like the gift, the spoken gift of parenting is what they stir up for us, the places they take us
Yeah.
in our lives and in our own, learning about ourselves and our own, transformation and development is, you know, is opportunities just like this, and that will, without this kind of knowledge, we just kind of skip over or, have a fight later with our parents or, it doesn't take people places like the places this could take you and your parents and,
Yeah.
mainly for yourself. So it's, it's, it's one that can be handled and it has a lot of good fodder and use for you.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I think the biggest practical thing is just, kind of, practically how I would start that conversation. Like, well, tell me, how did you guys end up on the hayride? Like, just be curious and, have my own agenda for where I want it to go and make sure that I'm satisfied with the call. And then also, just kind of food for thought about, well, where, like, when you said that they probably have opinions about my parenting that they haven't been expressing, it's like, oh, I know that's true. Like, I know that there's been lots of, like, little comments about things that I do or choices that I've made with them where I know that they don't agree, but they haven't just, said, hey, we don't agree with this. What's the deal?
Yeah.
And, and that that we get clear, like, I'm up for talking about this, at least, most of the time. And, but really, my decisions are my decisions, and I need to honor them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and when you can get to that point, and the more like as you work with your parents and getting yourself, expressed and clear and current, and some of these conversations can be vehicles toward that,
Yeah.
is then you can just have, you can actually have conversations like, well, what are the pros, why would you do it this way? And here's why I would choose to do it this way. And it's not so charged and doesn't have all that old baggage along with it.
Yeah, that. Yeah, even if you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, I really don't, I could imagine that would be a really nice thing to have a conversation like that, but that's not what I want right now.
No.
And I can aspire to that with them, to really be that, that clear with my relationship with them that I am open to their opinion to a greater extent than I am right now.
Yeah, and I'll
I
just
like
add
that.
this
I like that vision a lot.
yeah, because what I can relate is it's like as growing up as someone who was very enmeshed with her mother, myself, that I was, and so I just always followed along her opinion, her opinion. So, it was really important, for me to set my own agenda and continue to reinforce my own and just start having my own, opinion and way to do it. So when it came to parenting, I really had to work on, creating that boundary and that distance. But then after a while, once I felt like that, solidity in myself, then I could more openly listen to like, oh, well, that's a good point. I might take that into consideration, and then I could choose. Then it was more of a choice
Right.
when she would present something.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where that work can take you, and that's great.
Well, thank you, Gertrude. This is really helpful. It gives me a lot to think about too.
No, it's a great question, Michelle. Thanks so much. I look forward to hearing how it goes.
You got it.
All right, good.